And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Edu-ca-te. Today we're going to be talking about the naming of compounds, which is just chemical nomenclature. So there are certain compounds which we did the last video when we were introducing how compounds are formed, like sodium plus chlorine, which gave us sodium chloride. But then how did we reach to this name of sodium chloride? So this is just basically introducing how do we name certain compounds. So it's easy to name compounds. You just have to know the names of their elements, or the elements that are making those compounds, or the composition of that compound in terms of its element. So supposedly, let's take a compound which has got hydrogen, and let's take a compound which has got let me just see, and chlorine. So we are having hydrogen and chlorine. So these can react, because chlorine has got 7 valence electrons and is in need of 1 electron, of which hydrogen has got 1 valent electron. It can give to chlorine that valent electron. So in this case, we're going to be focusing on how do we name it hydrogen chloride instead of hydrogen chlorine. So we are having 2 elements participating, which is the hydrogen element. Hydrogen is represented by the symbol H, and then we've got chlorine. Chlorine is represented by symbol Cl. So, but then the compound is called hydrogen chloride. Okay, many might say it's understandable, it's reasonable to put hydrogen, and then why did we put iode instead of chlorine? Okay, so when you are naming the compounds, the first thing you have to do, you have to take the element which is on the left hand side of the periodic table first before the one on the right hand side. So we are not actually going to say chlorine hydride or something like that, or chlorine hydrogen or something like that. No, you have to take the elements which are at the left hand side. By these I mean these elements, all these elements. So whatever compounds you will have which involves these elements has got to start with these elements when you're calling them. You're not going to say chloride sodium. No, you're going to say sodium chloride, lithium oxide, hydrogen oxide, potassium oxide, all of those. So this means that these elements on the left hand side of the periodic table, when naming the compounds which involves these elements, of course every compound will have to involve these elements, because those elements here marked in yellow can only react with this element here marked in pink. So you have to start with the element which is at the right hand side when you are naming that compound. So in this case, when you're having 2 elements in total, so for you to have hydrogen chloride, you're combining hydrogen and chlorine. These are the reactants, right? So these reactants are forming the product hydrogen chloride. Hydrogen products, let me just say product here. So this is the product from the mixture, or this is the product from the reaction, the chemical reaction between hydrogen and chlorine. So here you are having a total of 2 reactants. This is reactant number 1 and reactant number 2. So you're having 2 reactants, which are namely the hydrogen atom and the chlorine atom, to form you the hydrogen chloride. So when you are having 2 elements, forming a product, the product or the compound will be called, will have iode at the end. You can see this is iode. So this IDE tells you that you are having a total of 2 elements or 2 reactants making up the compound. So here the compound is made up of hydrogen and chlorine. So we start with hydrogen because it's the element on the left hand side of the periodic table, or the element which has got excess protons after the ion transfer. So here hydrogen chloride. We first start with this element on the left hand side, element on the right hand side, then this last element, we're going to name it and end with an IDE. So instead of chlorine, you can see this is chlorine. This INE, you replace the last 3 letters with IDE, chloride. Therefore, it is therefore called hydrogen chloride. Therefore, if you are going to make, let's take another example just for more clarification. If you are going to have sodium plus chlorine, so you're having, this is sodium, this is chlorine. So these react to form you sodium chloride. This is now sodium chloride. Why is it an I? Just because we're having a total of 2 reactants or 2 elements which are reacting with each other to form this sodium chloride. So the presence of 2 reactants forms a compound with an IDE at the end. So when you are calling them, you call the sodium in full. The first element, or the element which is found at the left hand side of the periodic table, which are these pink elements basically in the periodic table. So we call those elements by its full name, which is sodium. We're not going to change it and say sodide or something like that. So this is sodium chloride. Instead of saying chlorine, INE, this ANE is replaced with IDE. Therefore, this becomes sodium chloride, meaning there's 2 reactants making up the compound. So let's look at those which have got 3 reactants making up the compound. So you're having element A plus element B plus element C to give you compound A, B, C. So these are the reactants and that one is the product. So how do you name those compounds which have got 3 reactants in it? You name them with a last 8, sulfate, phosphate, all of those 8. That 8 is simply meaning that we are having 3 reactants in total. You can see that you have got A here, you've got B here, you've got C. Therefore, it is that's why you have to end with an 8. You have to call up the first. You have to call up this first in full. You have to call up it in full for first of all, and then the last one you have to call it in 8. So that 8 tells you that you are having 3 elements building up one compound. Thank you for watching.